Hey, welcome everybody to the Crazy Shift Show. I've got Perry Marshall with me today. Welcome, Perry.
Good to be here. Thank you, Ira. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Hey, and I just got a notice here. It looks like we're not streaming too effectively to LinkedIn, but for everybody that's on Facebook and YouTube, we'll be there, and we'll end up, hopefully the LinkedIn connection will come back. They must be having an issue. Not surprising. The LinkedIn Live, when it works, it works, and when it doesn't, it doesn't. So, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the paradigm shift, being agility, different mindset, being flexible, all those things. So, Perry, you and I, we were just talking before we went on the air. I've known you by connection. I don't know, 12 years, somewhere back when. You've come from an interesting path, like I have. You were an engineer, I think, first, and you were a marketer. Now you're a business strategist. I came from healthcare. I was a dentist. Started a consulting company. My passion is certainly on the marketing side. I often say I happen to be a marketer and just happen to be in another business, which is probably similar to where you are. But want to give people just a little bit of background, because again, you went from engineering to, you had a best-selling book about Google ads, marketing there, and now you've got a whole entrepreneurial. Basically, you've put out a prize that is it? Am I right? 10 times bigger than the Nobel?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty and start talking about what's going on, what the world's going to look like post-pandemic.
Well, so I'm the guy who, when my wife was 3 months pregnant, I got laid off from my engineering job. And I could have probably found a similar job if I'd been willing to move across the country, but I don't know if anybody can relate to. No, I really don't want to move across the country. And so I went into sales, and I remember kind of thinking, well, all these sales guys that call on me as an engineer, they didn't seem all that bright, so this can't be that hard. And my friend Frank said, Perry, you don't just stick a pencil behind your ear and completely change professions. There's probably going to be a bumpy ride, and it was a bumpy ride. It was 2 years of bologna sandwiches and ramen soup and spiraling credit card balances and newborn baby and wife no longer having a job, so that income stream disappears. And it's okay. So what does this have to do with anybody here and now? Well, it was being thrown in the lake and being forced to swim. And eventually a lot of big epiphanies came from that, and a lot of big learnings and a lot of big shifts. But if I had to do it over again, I can identify all kinds of things that I coulda, woulda, shoulda
Right.
done better. But in all, you know what? I did eventually wake up from my stupidity spasms. And so I went into sales, and that all of my struggles led me to discover direct marketing. Because the problem that I had was, nobody's going to take you seriously as any kind of an expert if the way you got to them was by, banging on their door, right? And so I learned how to position myself as an expert before I ever tried to get in. So I wrote the world's best-selling book on Google advertising. I wrote a book called 80-20 Sales and Marketing, and then I have another project called Evolution 2.0, which we can talk about as much or as little as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, and that's fascinating. But before we get there, because I know we've got a lot of people that are trying to figure out how, where we are right now in the crisis. It's not post-pandemic yet. But how do we make it post? How do we emerge? How do companies emerge? So you've got a business strategy firm, you've got a roundtable, you've got a lot of programs, you're working with a lot of clients. In fact, I'm going to pull this up because you have something just to give people optimism. I'm going to see if I can and I keep looking around here. I've literally got 4 screens up here at the same time. So
Yeah.
I'm broadcaster, producer, director, interviewer, host, and all those things. So I apologize to everybody. I'm not kind of distracted, and I am here. But let me pull this thing up, see if I can do that. Okay, so there's your screen, the Slingshot Recovery. I love that. Obviously, that infers a lot of optimism if people think through this correctly, if they change their paradigm. And one of the reasons I want to pull this up, and I highly recommend anybody kind of go up to Perry's site, perrymarshall.com, and look at it. But what I like, the thing that attracted me probably years ago to Perry was that you kind of communicates in a lot of metaphors, tries to make it easy for people to understand what the problem is. So, here it's when the paradigm shifts, all the clocks are reset to zero, which we are. We go back normal. I love this story you created, by the way, the obituary for normal.
Yes.
I took an excerpt of that and I posted it on LinkedIn the other day to promote this. I love that because it makes it very real. And so communicating, coronavirus is the last dirt on normal's coffin. I was using something similar to that. So there's a great explanation. Just reading this gives people a perspective. On the bottom end is you've got a program that attaches to this. Part of it's you can subscribe to some of it for free. You get daily emails and things. So I'll take that. I'll make the plug for you, Barry, on that. But the Slingshot Recovery indicates that there'll be a recovery. I mean, the pandemic's going to go away. A ton of opportunity. So let's talk about that a little bit because you've been hands-on with certain clients. You've worked with gyms. You've worked with realtors. Maybe a hair salon, professionals like dentists. They've shut down. They were non-essential, couldn't deal with it.
Yep.
Tell a little bit about what's going on, how you're helping them get through it or reframe the situation.
So I made a little quiz. If you go to perrymarshall.com/impact, I've got this little assessment, and it's the COVID impact score, and it goes from 0 to 150. So you answer about 12 questions. It take you literally 30 or 45 seconds, and you just click the radio buttons and you answer the questions, and you'll get so if you get 150, it means you're selling COVID masks and heroin, I guess, and your business is booming. If you got a 23, then you're probably in a serious pickle. If you got 100, it means you're even Steven. And I think this is a triage situation. So there are businesses, a few businesses that are absolutely thriving. In fact, you were talking just the other day on one of your podcasts about there's a whole sector of industries that are up, like logistics and things like that. Okay, right. Well, great. And if that's you, God bless you. There are a bunch of businesses in the middle where, let's say your score is a 75, it probably means you're going to be paddling really hard, and it probably means that you're going to be reinventing something that you're selling a little or quite a bit. Now, I completely relate this because I had a seminar I was going to be doing a month from now with 200 people in Chicago who paid anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 to go. Okay, so what am I going to do, right? So like I'm in the same boat as a lot of people. Like there's a lot of pivoting that you end up having to do. Okay, and then there's people with low scores, and that requires a great deal of judgment. I've had numerous conversations where I said, put a fork in it, it's dead. You need to walk away from the whole thing and start over. And the sooner you do that, the faster your life is going to return to normal. I've had several of those conversations. If you got a 23 out of 150 on that score, you need to figure out, well, can I just like hide out and hunker down, or until it gets better. And then when it gets like, okay, let's say we don't have a pandemic anymore. How fast is my industry going to come back? A catering company is going to come back a lot faster than professional baseball, right?
Right.
Or a trade show, right? And so some industries have a very quick reaction time, and some are like molasses. And so, right off the top of the stack, you've got to triage yourself and figure out where you are. So basically, is it? I'd say there's 4 situations. There's do not try to wait it out because you'll starve to death. Just go do something else. There is you can wait it out. There's pivot, and there's boomtown, and those are the 4 situations.
So let's go back, roll the clock back just a minute or two. You gave some specific example. You're talking about some companies. You said, "Hey, it's just time to bail. Just give it up. You got a 23 on your quiz." That wouldn't be the only reason that they should do that, but
right.
That hey, I've got some troubles. Without revealing, obviously, you want to keep things confidential and anonymous. What are some examples? And again, because I'm sure some people are wrestling with that now. They're can they survive?
Well, so I have a client who's runs a fitness gym. I mean, it's a big facility, and it's one of the biggest ones in their city. And so an interesting thing happened. So like the schools are shut down, and within a few days, like the state said, you can't have large numbers of people, and so they had to close their facility. They had a major competitor in the same town who they announced that that they were just freezing everything, and they were going to have to furlough all their employees. And because it was so early in the pandemic and people had not adjusted to the mentality, there was this backlash. And everybody was like, "Oh, those guys are terrible. They got rid of their fitness coaches." Now, I don't know what they're supposed to do, right? But people weren't quite there. And I don't know that particular because I think it might have been a signal that they had some not good relationships under the surface. I think there was probably more to the story. I don't even know if they're coming back. Maybe they already had financial problems. My particular client, I think they will come back. Like, as long as this doesn't last ridiculously long, they can run the thing like on a night light. You know what I'm saying? Now, I had another company where they were selling a certain kind of commercial equipment, and they had bought the company from another person. They had thought that they could, because the person was retiring and they were just kind of writing the thing out. Mm-hmm. They thought, well, if we go in there, we can really fix the place up, kind of like rehabbing a house. And like, we should be really good to go. Well, the rehab was already quite a bit harder than they thought. There was a lot of other problems. And then COVID hits. And he tells me how much money he's got. And I just took one look at it and I said, "There's no way." Right. I'm sorry, man. Like, and I said, "You need to grieve this. You need to acknowledge all of your awful feelings about it and all that stuff. And that's going to probably be a long emotional process, but you need to machine gun the wreckage as fast as possible." And that's a phrase for in the military when an airplane crashes, like you machine gun the instrument panel and the black box mm-hmm. and everything, so that the other guys can't, get your stuff, and walk away just as fast as you can. And I think that's where a lot of people are at. Oh, also, most of my clients are entrepreneurs, but one of my clients is a manager of a company. And I said, well, while you're trying to help your company rearrange, because they're essentially shut down, I think you should be looking around for other opportunities. Like, like just between me and you, like trying to help you personally and professionally, you need to take a serious inventory of your skills and figure out where, who's got a score of 120 on this quiz that needs some good management help right now. And maybe you should just jump ship.
So, you talk about the term Kairos. You introduced me to a couple of terms, Greek term,
Yes.
which I wasn't familiar with. So why don't you tell everybody where that fits, how that is, because there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. And you've heard, if you've listened to any of the live streams, and I've said this over and over again. So to me, it's getting old, but apparently there are people that haven't heard me yet, is that not by any grand plan. This is sort of luck. I wish I could say this was my strategy, that I knew this was coming. So I targeted the businesses that were in manufacturing that couldn't be harmed, in distribution, in e-commerce, in healthcare. I didn't. It's just where the business evolved. But, today, there were 2 energy companies that I work with, utility companies. One's hiring a CFO. So again, unique, specific position. There were, the other day, there was somebody looking for a new CEO of a foundation, a nonprofit. There are companies that are looking for remote workers. They're starting to say, hey, not everybody can work from home, but our trend is we're going to really focus on that work from home. So we need to one is identify people that can do that naturally, or identify our existing workforce, assess them, and find out what additional skills that they need. So there's a lot going on out there. So for although we've got 30 million people that are unemployed, there's probably more than that are technically unemployed. They just happen to be on the PPP plan at the moment or furloughed. There's going to be this flood of people. As I said, talent acquisition sort of going to look like, from my side where I work with clients, is going to look like shoveling out of a blizzard with a teaspoon. Because just months ago, just 8 weeks ago, people were complaining that there were only 4 or 5 million people that were unemployed in the country. Now, overnight, we've 5 times, 6 times, 7 times that number. So there literally is going to be there's going to be this blizzard of people applying for jobs. And it's going to be, from the job seeker side, how do job seekers rise the cream to the crop, or, rise to the top? Yeah. How do companies identify those people? Because it is going to be the proverbial, blizzard or needle in haystack. So there's a lot going. There's a lot going on, but ultimately there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there, because there are still companies that are growing. You're seeing new companies pop up, shift gears, that paradigm shift, new business models evolving. So let's talk about Kairos, and then let's talk about some of the skills or the opportunities you see out there. Maybe you have an example or two of one of your clients that sees that opportunity.
So the ancient Greeks had 2 words to describe time. So one was chronos, like chronograph, and that is time, like on a watch, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that chronos time. But they had another word, Kairos, which was like it's when opportunities open up. It's when suddenly this is the season for something, when another time was not the season for something. One of the connotations was the time at which you could release an arrow and it would fly and reach its target. And so it's two completely different ways of thinking about time. And so if you think in terms of season of time, we hit an abrupt change of season. And there are going to be a whole bunch of things that were in the past season and they ain't never coming back. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be a whole new set of things. So the way I think of it is imagine that we were all in a big giant Walmart parking lot, and we were all walking around looking for a crack in the pavement somewhere where we could plant a seed where a big giant weed wasn't always already growing. And it was kind of hard to find one. And then all of a sudden there's a Richter 7.8 earthquake, and there's a giant 8-foot chasm in the parking lot, and it goes 90 feet deep. And now there's like all of the fresh soil exposed that you could ever want. And you can go, you go into that canyon and you can plant things. This is what has happened. It's inevitable that a whole bunch of opportunities have shown up. Now, I think one of the struggles that people have is a lot of good quality, conscientious, honest, hardworking people feel almost like it's exploitative. It's not, okay? Listen, all human transactions are based on pain and suffering. Okay? Like if Uncle Carl dies this afternoon, there's a funeral home and a casket company and all of that, and a hearse and the flowers at the flower shop, like they're all going to benefit from Uncle Carl dying. Right. Okay? And honestly, look, you know what this is? Okay, I got a $10 bill here. This is a unit of pain and suffering. Okay, that's what money is. Money is stored pain and suffering, and like you have to understand that. Like, even if you just if you sell somebody a sandwich, well, why do you sell them a sandwich? Because they're hungry, right? Like, right. And so yes, of course, this opens up opportunities, and like this is the agility decade. Like maybe, hopefully, probably, perhaps this is the only pandemic this decade. It ain't going to be the only disruption. Okay, hope. It ain't going to be the only right. And so your ability to jump into a new situation and make sense of it faster, it equates to mobility, and I think mobility is the name of the game. Now, that quiz I gave you, perrymarshall.com/impact, where you get a score. Now, right. Here's like a big punchline about that. There's not just one score. You hit refresh, and you take it again based on slightly different assumptions. And then you take it again based on slightly different assumptions. Can I get my score from 62 to 72 to 82 to 92 by changing? Well, what if I change an assumption about how this product is delivered, what our customers really want from us? On the screen, Ira, you put that quote by Warren Buffett.
Let me put it back up there, because I think that was, we were starting to dance around that a bit. Again, great quote. Yeah, there it is.
Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. Well,
a lot of people are swimming naked.
Everybody's
almost standing on the beach. Yeah, almost everybody is standing on the beach naked these days, right?
And so your job, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab the biggest stack of towels that you can and run out and help the naked people cover themselves up, and to ask them as many questions as you can. I had a client who's in the trade show business, and they sell hardware and software to process trade show leads and stuff like that. Well, the trade show business is a slow moving business, right? Mm-hmm. And so, the knife comes down. All right, they're not going to have an easy time selling anything they've normally been selling. But I talked to the CEO and I said, well, let's think about it. The tide's gone out and a whole bunch of your customers are swimming naked, right? So there's more pain and suffering. There's more bleeding necks. There's more problems than ever before. In fact, if you're willing to listen to somebody talk to you about their problems, there's more willingness for people to get on the phone or Zoom and talk to you about their problems than ever before, right? And he goes, right. I said, so you are a genius about sales and marketing processes, because that's what you do for a living, right? He goes, right. Okay, so call your sales managers and all your clients, and don't talk to them about trade shows. Talk to them about their sales and marketing processes, and talk to them about how are you hitting your monthly targets? How are you hitting your quarterly targets? And just start working with them. And I said, listen, I can't tell you, you and I talking about you making those phone calls, I cannot give you a business model on a silver platter of how you're going to make money talking to these guys. But here's what I do know. They have a big problem, and some of them have a really big problem, and you know more about how to solve it than they do. There's a business opportunity in there somewhere.
Right.
Maybe you end up being in the sales consulting business for the next 6 months while your trade show business goes on the back burner. But you have customers, you have clients, you have contacts, they have customers, you have window into the data of their sales operations. You know if like one of these leads that you sent them got followed up on or not. So you can be the surgeon and you can go fix that. And that's what he's doing. And he'll figure it out. And that's where the opportunity is.
Well, it's about transferable skills too. And I think if people go back and they stop thinking about their title, or in this case, what their job, what their code is, by industry code, it is what are the skills that help them get there. And I'm the first to tell you, I mean, when I had a practice, I had a thriving practice. I sold it when I was 44 years old because I loved everything about dentistry but dentistry. I loved the business, loved the entrepreneur side, loved the people, loved the marketing. I just didn't I was good at, the good news is I was good at it. The bad news is, for me, it meant I had to do the work. And unlike most professionals who'd say, if it wasn't for the people, I'd love my job. Well, I loved the job, and it was the dentistry that got in my way. So, I was a VP of a hospital. I started this firm. I mean, I've done a lot of, I've done things along the way. But everybody says, how did you make that leap from dentistry to consultant to advising people on businesses? And I was like, here's what I was really good at. I used to get, this is a joke. I used to get paid a lot of money, and I could submit to insurance for differential diagnosis. In the rest of the world, it's called critical thinking skills. I liked integrating. I was a good critical thinker. I could bring abstract ideas together. Now they call it design thinking, but it's like, how do you come up with two pretty much opposite thoughts or contradictory thoughts and go, hey, I see where they cross. I see where that blend is. And I was good with people. I could communicate. I won't say I was a good writer back then, because I look at some of the things I wrote 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and it's pretty appalling, even 10 years ago, and it's pretty appalling. But they were basic, they were core skills that I was able to develop. I had leadership skills, and I worked on those over time. Those fit anywhere. I mean, somebody told me in the 80s when I talked about, I don't know if I'm going to do this the rest of my life. He goes, whatever you do, you'll be okay, because the skills that you got are transferable. And I think that's going back to your trade show. That's what it is. So as you were talking there, I was thinking, if someone's looking for an opportunity, it is that when we're not going back to normal. I mean, normal is dead, as you said. You wrote the obituary for it. But there's going to be a lot of people working from home and it's going to continue. Everybody's not, and even if people can't do it full time, part of the time, because people just aren't going to go back and do this 2-hour commute every day. Companies aren't set up that way to be able to do that with social distancing and physical distancing. So we're never going to have all those people back, but they may need that quantity of people. So what are all the jobs? What are all the new businesses, the new roles that will pop up to help people function, be productive, working from home? You've already seen that. You've already seen companies go up. The ability to find somebody to come in your house. It was Geek Squad. Hey, can somebody come and hook this up? Now there's literally going to be millions of homes that have to be reset up. New bandwidth, new technology, better security, to be able to work from home, to connect, which creates new businesses. It creates new jobs. I think people are going to understand what free agency is now, that they're going to be able to have these side hustles because they're going to now be equipped at they're not stealing their desktop time at work. They're now at home. So there's a whole host of new opportunities that are out there for sure. I mean, obviously things like dentistry, you're still going to have to go to the dentist. You're not going to be able to do that remote, but telehealth, I can keep kicking myself for saying, teledoc is going to be the slow curve up, and give it another year or two and it'll be adopted. And then all of a sudden in February, it's immediately adopted. It's the only way you can see a physician for a lot of things.
Well, so I think what you're going to see when things return to, people being able to go places is you're going to see a bifurcation. You're going to see that some people stay with the new pattern. They're like, I don't want to do a commute. Apparently I don't have to. Like we thought I did, but right, you're going to see
get
that
3 to 4 hours of my life back every day.
You're going to see, however, you're going to see a backlash where parts of the world go more brick and mortar than they were, more in person, because some people react against what has just happened. So I think you're going to see both. Now, I think there's like an obvious layer of opportunities like Zoom, okay, right? That's really obvious. The not so obvious is like the next wave is people dealing with the problems with Zoom or the problems with running a virtual company. Now, I've been running a virtual company for 15 years. I am completely used to it, okay? But there's a whole wave of people who are not, okay? And so it's dealing with the secondary effects. That's where the new industries are. So, for example, about a month ago, I attended a training on how to make Zoom meetings much, much, much more interesting. How to use the breakout rooms, how to, and it wasn't just using the bells and whistles. It was like completely changing the psychology of a presentation and an audience interaction to make it much, much more interactive. It was very impressive.
Let me share this with you while you're on that, because last week, in fact, last Tuesday, I had presented to SHRM Talent. So it's one of SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management. It's one of their largest conferences that they had. And we were supposed to be in Disney and obviously didn't get there. And so they made it virtual. And I watched people on a lot of the presenters, they had a pre-presenter meeting. And a lot of the people were struggling. Their lighting, their background. And, it's like, oh, do I have to show my face? Can I just show slides? All that sort of stuff. So that's the low-hanging fruit that people are going to have to get comfortable with. But I'm pretty comfortable with this technology. Like you, I've been remote for 15 years and I use it all the time. Not to this extent, but I used it. Well, I had the conference and I thought this will be pretty interesting. There'll be a chat. We'll get the questions. I had to time it a little differently, but when you're on stage, it's just easier. There's a relationship. I can see the people. I can react. There's an engagement, and that was gone. Well, it didn't take too long that I realized. I looked at the chat, and the chat was crazy busy. I'm watching. It's like I just said something, and then I glance over, and the chat was just on the side of the screen, so I didn't have to go far. And I'm watching like a quote that I made go viral, and people were posting it. And then there's the interaction to that. Now, that may happen emotionally through telepathy in a room. People laugh, they giggle, they turn to their side, they say something, and then you have to pay attention because it's absolutely rude to be on your phone the whole time when you're here. You're not supposed to be talking the whole time. What I found was I had 297 people in my session. There were at the end 293. Now, whether they were in the restroom or dining out and the screen was just on, I don't know. But the interaction was incredible. I did like 28 presentations last year, probably another 25 or 28, the year before at conferences. I had more response, more engagement, more interaction with the people on a virtual call. And I couldn't even see them. It was me, my slide, and a chat. So I couldn't see them. They could see me. I sold more books. I had more responses to my online courses, more people requesting information to talk to me. At that conference, on that 50 minutes that I was online, than I did all the other ones combined.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. So I know people want to be there in present, but the effectiveness was really different. So I think there's going to be this movement to have a lot more. Maybe there'll be one annual event, but there's going to be a lot more of these smaller venues, or they're going to be simultaneously live streamed, over this, because they were forced to do this. Either we cancel it or we go virtual. And so there's a lot of people that are liking this response. It also opened up the door to a lot of people who can't travel. They can't afford to do that. They got kids, at home, or they got a disability and they can't travel to these events, to these conferences. This totally, I think there's going to be so many opportunities, like you were saying, is what, not Zoom. It's like, okay, how do we resell Zoom? What are all the sub industries, the sub jobs that are going to evolve from, like Zoom? Zoom's not going to, obviously there's going to be other competitors out there. There are now, and we'll see where Zoom goes. But there's going to be a million. I mean, it's just going to be, I don't know, a million, but there's going to be hundreds of thousands new jobs created just from the virtual economy.
Well, what's funny, Ira, is I have, for years, I've told people, if you can figure out how to run your company in person and not virtually, you should do it, because communication is a lot more work when you're virtual than it is when you're all under the same roof. But I've also always told people there's a very distinct trade-off, and here's what the trade-off is. I just told you the downside of virtual. The upside of virtual is you can recruit everywhere in the entire country or even the whole world. You don't just have to select people that you can get within a 20-mile radius or commuting distance. And those are the trade-offs. And I have several clients who are in the recruiting business, and there's hardly ever a meeting that I have where we don't end up talking about the difficulty of getting good employees and good talent. I mean, it's always on the table.
That's not going away, by the way. This means there's more people out there looking, but the same skill shortage we had before still exists. There's still a lot of people that'll be out of work. There are people that are learning. They're taking advantage of this. They're doing free distance learning, free courses. They are learning new skills. But the lack of skills is still going to exist. In fact, it will probably be greater, because now people need different skills. They need better skills, for sure.
Yep. So needles in haystacks. I mean, I think finding needles in haystacks is going to be a good business for anybody. If you have and that's like a super broad statement, okay? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't care what industry you're in. We're not just talking about recruiting here. Right. We're talking about there's a lot of haystacks in a lot of industries for a lot of different reasons.
So, hey, I have two questions, because I know we're sort of getting to the end of this. Because I want to respect your time. I want to respect all the listeners' time. The first question I have is, and when we talk about the pluses and the minuses of productivity, because we're going to have physical distancing for a while, maybe, I don't know if it'll be permanently, but we're going to have it for a long distance. And companies are going to revise their workspaces. I know if you're in a city, even how do you get up an elevator? They're talking about there's only 2 or 3 people allowed in an elevator. It used to be 10 to 12 to 15 crammed in there to go up. Meeting room. I was reading the other day, if you have a boardroom that traditionally sat 25 people at a big long table, now you can get 5 people in there and comply with this. So it is thinking through that workspace. Will productivity be better at work than working from home?
It depends entirely on the person. So my daughter's boyfriend was talking about, it's a physical office, not like me, right? And then all of a sudden everybody's got to work at home. And he was talking about all these bizarre things they were doing to try to check up on people. Well, we want your Skype on all the time. We want to watch you. Okay. And I was just going, I can't imagine trying to watch my employees. Like, are you crazy? but like,
trust.
Like yeah, I know. It's like, you don't trust people. Like, well, so there's clearly a whole entire population of people that has to figure out how to be productive under a completely different set of parameters. And I'm used to working with entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs always, their time is, they're always on the clock, you know,
Right.
because they're self-employed, right? And so you screw around all you want. Nobody cares as long as you sell the stuff or whatever. I foresee very different, like a very different notion of what hourly work is, right? Because there are industries where you kind of got to supervise everybody.
It's got to be on merits. It's got to be on outcomes. I mean, and I talk about that in my Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, which, by the way, the first 130 chapters of this book has zero to do with recruiting, in which people, and I've had two people recently comment. They go, you know, I don't understand why you titled it that way, and I won't go into that explanation, because the original title was When the Shift Hits Your Plan, and it was about exponential change. And it was like, how am I going to make a living talking about exponential change? Now I can teach a 3-year-old, you know, literally they can teach me what exponential growth or an exponential curve looks like. But, you know, 3 years ago when I came up with it, it was like, yeah, you know, I mean, it's going to relate more about recruiting in the age of Googlization, recruiting in the age of exponential change, rather than just focusing on that. But you're right. I mean, it's things are going to, you know, change. You know, you're going to continue to change incredibly quickly. There's going to be a ton of opportunity out there, and it's just sitting there. You know, a lot of Kairos, right?
Yes.
So, before we go, I want you to be able to tell people how they can get a hold of you. I've been streaming it across there, so they'll know that. But real briefly, tell us about your new initiative. I think it's fascinating.
Oh, Evolution 2.0. Yeah. Well, so I'm an engineer by training, and I'm very, very deeply interested in science. And a little less than a year ago, I announced the world's largest science research prize in the world.
Larger than the Nobel.
Right? Yeah, 10 times larger. $10 million prize. I announced it at the Royal Society in Great Britain. It's called the Evolution 2.0 prize, and it's a search for where does information come from? The original information that we know about in the world is the genetic code. And so where did the genetic code come from is the way we normally frame the question. But it's actually a bigger question than that. We live in the information age. We're swimming. There's ones and zeros zinging past your head all day long. And you know what? Nobody knows where information comes from. It's a science problem, it's a technology problem, it's a religious problem, it's a philosophical problem. And so, and just to kind of connect it into the current context, it's called the Evolution 2.0 prize. And you know it's something interesting. We don't really understand how viruses evolve either. Mm-hmm. If we did, we might not be in a pandemic. Our understanding of even virus evolution is very sketchy. And so, yeah, well, so this is like the most big, hairy, audacious goal that I know how to put out there. And if people want to know more, you can go to evo2.org, evo2.org, and we've got a podcast and a YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to things and see what happens there. And I'll also, I want to encourage people on the business side, if you go to perrymarshall.com/impact and take that quiz, when you get the answer, there's an email sign up. And if you sign up, I'll tell you via email, I'll tell you some really interesting stories of clients that I've guided through this kind of craziness. The very first one is a guy that, boy, in 2008, when Lehman Brothers crashed, he was in the direct mail business, and that whole industry was in a death spiral immediately. And 6 months later, he was one of the very few people in his business that had money, and he started buying out companies. And so You go to perrymarshall.com/impact and take the quiz. You can sign up there.
Yeah. I'll validate that. Actually, I did sign up the other day, and they're great. That's why I got more excited every day when I got your email. So I encourage everybody to do that. And obviously, they can get in touch with you by going to perrymarshall.com.
Yeah. So, Ira, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I want to, wish all the people out there who are in the, boy, if you're in HR right now, that's a crazy world. So I have sympathy for all of the things that are getting thrown at you. And just a quick, I was talking to a guy who's in the British military in some incredibly dangerous situations over the last 30 years. And he said the best thing you can ever do when you're confronted in a stressful situation is stop and take 3 breaths. Okay. And I know that's so elementary and it's so simple, but I even, my wife is often even telling our kids to do that sometimes when things get tense, right? Hang on to your sanity and take care of yourself and get some sleep.
Right. No, absolutely. And I'm not, I've always struggled with even the concept of meditation and just zoning out. But 3, 5, 10 seconds, breaths, slow, deep breaths is remarkable what it's done. And I've on the podcast and on this show, I've had a number of different people that were, experts in mindfulness. And we actually had, I don't know if you've come across him. His name's Pandikasa. He's a former monk. He lived in a monastery for years, and now he lives in the city. He doesn't live on, but he's in New York City, and he came out. So I actually heard him speak in the spring, and we've been connected. But again, if you can't do it all, just take those 3 deep breaths and put your feet on the ground. Take the breaths slow, and it does change perspective. Before we sign off here, there's a couple things. One is if you're not a member of Googlization Nation, go up to googlizationnation.com. You'll get free updates. And this is a really, really busy week. So in addition to people like Perry, you and I, tomorrow on my podcast, not live stream, but on my podcast, I've got Keith Katani. Keith owns a company called Guide Spark. They talk about the importance of communication. How do you get through the noise, and especially in a time when there's so much noise out there, and simultaneously people need to be transforming how their cultures. They need to be transforming their businesses. So we're going through this transformational change. At the same time, there's a ton of noise. How do you get the message through the noise, and how do you get people to act on it? That's what we'll be talking about tomorrow. And then Thursday, Barry, you mentioned trust. You were inferring about trust in people. I've got a good friend of mine on Chuck Coker, and we're going to be. He actually just released a trust questionnaire, and it looks at things like how transparent you are, how relatable you are, how empathetic you are. What's your empowerment score? How does that fit? He just had it validated, and so we'll be talking about that. And in the afternoon, we're talking about the workplace, where we were hitting around there with 3 HR experts, thought leaders, talking with Mike Clark from Gallup, who really interesting there. Lance Hahn, who was with ERE and Talent, to really popular publications. He's the new editor over there. And then Lee Andress, who's got Acathame as her company. But she's really kind of on the leading edge of trends and where things are happening. So got a lot of people this week. So for anyone out there who's interested in getting them, go to googlizationnation.com. And you get that email and updates, or you can actually text to 64600. That's 64600. Just text G Nation, as in Google, G Nation, and you'll get a text right before we go on the air. Perry, thanks. It's great. It's great having this conversation with you. I will definitely be following all your things, because every time I read one of your newsletters, I got a new, or your emails, I got a new brainstorm about where to go. Hopefully I've contributed a little bit for you.
Thank you.
I do hope everybody stays safe and healthy. I know some of the states, some of the areas are starting to relax things a little bit. Please be careful. It's not over till it's over, and it's going to take us a while, but welcome to the new world. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Ira.